Welcome to That Philly, John. I'm Travis Schmidt, joined by Brian McLernon and Jake Clark, and today's first discussion will be the Eagles. And boys, was the Commanders' win a good win for the Birds?
I would say, yeah. I mean, I liked the way that the passing game looked overall. Jalen Hurts probably had the best game of his season so far. 319 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. I mean, overall, he looked confident out there. He was throwing the ball pretty well. And I just liked how he looked. A.J. Brown staying dominant as always. 8 catches, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. DeAndre Swift obviously wasn't as dominant as we've seen from previous weeks, but 16 carries, 57 yards, and a score for him. And Devontae Smith also pulling in a touchdown and also racking up 7 catches for 99 yards. So overall, the main takeaway is the offense. I think they played exceptional. They picked apart that Washington defense pretty well. And overall, I kind of just liked what I was seeing from them.
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with you there, Brian. I think that the win was a bit shaky. All the things that you mentioned, the offense played well, and putting up over 30 points against a division rival is no small feat, but I do think that the defense just didn't play great. Sam Howell looked way too good for this Eagles defense. Sam Howell just looking way too good against an Eagles defense that is much better than they performed against the Commanders. Both times they played against the Commanders, the Eagles defense looked miserable out there, Brian. And for that reason, I'm going to say it was a bit of a shaky win nonetheless for the Birds.
Yeah, I can see that. And also, we could also point out some of the turnovers they had on offense. Obviously, the Kenneth Gainwell fumble being something, and then obviously going down 14-3 early. But I liked the way that they bounced back after going down 11 points early in the game and kind of just figuring themselves out offensively. Important guys stepping up, being like, all right, we're down 14-3, still got plenty of time left. Let's have our offense wake up. And after that, Jalen Hurts was looking great. The offense started to connect. And I liked what I was seeing after the adversity they felt early in the game.
Yeah, you do mention the fumbles, and the fumbles were really bad, both inside the red zone. If you play competitive teams like that in the playoffs, you're not going to be able to win playoff games. And I just think that if you go against, especially coming out of the bye, you're going to have this gauntlet where you have to go against Kansas City, Buffalo, Dallas again. Just teams like that are going to be playoff caliber teams. These turnovers can't happen for you to be successful against them.
Yeah, and you did talk about that defense not really being as strong as we like to see. But obviously, when they needed to come through most, they did. I mean, Hassan Reddick got that big sack to pretty much seal the deal. So, I mean, yeah, they weren't looking too great, obviously letting up 31 points to a team that probably shouldn't have as good of an offense as they did in the Commanders, and Sam Howell obviously being new to the NFL still in his first full season. But when they needed to come through, they did, and that's what I like to see.
So, yeah, not the most settling week for the Eagles, but do you guys think they have what it takes to beat a very talented Cowboys team this week?
I would say yes, and it's going to be they're going to go back to the roots with running the football and playing good defense. I think that this week was an iffy week for the defense. I think that when the Eagles play their best football, they're running the ball up the middle with DeAndre Swift, who had a good game against the Commanders, 16 carries for 57 yards and a touchdown. And you look at the Eagles' defensive ranking, they're 3rd in yards a game, 8th in yards allowed, which is very impressive. Offensively, as I said, they're 3rd in yards a game. It's going to come down to that run offense that's really going to be important for them, and the defense is going to step up. And Dak Prescott in high-leverage situations folds like a lawn chair. If this game is any bit close, it's going to be really bad for the Cowboys, and I think that I could see the Eagles pulling this one out because of the defensive pressure and the run game.
I do like them pulling it out, Jake, but I will have to say that the passing game is going to be something that they're going to have to stay good at. I mean, obviously, Jalen Hurts looking great against Washington, going to have to continue that. They're 7th in the league in passing right now, and they just got to continue that. Jalen Hurts coming off of a big game, plus they're going to be at Lincoln Financial Field for America's Game of the Week. That's got to be big for them, having that home field advantage, something that they're going to have to take advantage of against a division rival. And I mean, again, like Jalen Hurts obviously does lead the league in interceptions or is one of the leaders in picks, but coming off of that Washington game, he's going to have to build that momentum of not really turning the ball over through the air, and he's going to have to pick apart that Dallas secondary, especially without Trayvon Diggs, who's out with a torn ACL.
Yeah, absolutely dominant from A.J. Brown these last couple of weeks, breaking records. And is A.J. Brown the best Eagles wide receiver of all time?
I would say yes. I think that A.J. Brown, in the impact that he has had in his short time here in Philadelphia, he's already breaking records, 6+ weeks with over 125 yards receiving and a touchdown. The first NFL player to ever do that. I think that A.J. Brown is a very, very special player, and I think that he's not only on pace to be the greatest Eagles wide receiver of all time, he is the greatest Eagles wide receiver of all time. You look at some of the other guys, Harold Carmichael, Terrell Owens, Deshaun Jackson, Tommy McDonald, and Mike Quick, just to name a couple guys that would be in conversation for that best wide receiver of all time. I do think that A.J. Brown tops them all. I think that A.J. Brown, his ability, the way the game has changed, and the ability that A.J. Brown is showing out there on the gridiron makes him the best to put on an Eagles uniform at the wide receiver position.
Jake, I like what you said about him being on pace to be a part of that conversation of the best Eagles wide receiver in franchise history, but I'm going to have to disagree with him being the best. I think we have seen a lot of greatness from him, but I think we haven't seen enough of it. He's only been with the team for, let's say, a little less than 30 games or so. I think we need a bit more, maybe like a year or two, and obviously the rest of this season to really get into that conversation of him being the best wide receiver in Eagles franchise history. But I think he's definitely on pace to get there with guys like Carmichael and Mike Quick.
Yeah, I don't know that it's on pace. I think he's already there. And I think that just because of it's been such a small sample size, and yet he's done so much. He's only going to keep getting better. And right now, where he stands, I think that he beats out a couple of those guys. Some of the guys were playing when the game hadn't really been developed. You remember Terrell Owens. He's not really remembered as an Eagle. Deshaun Jackson isn't a Hall of Fame caliber wide receiver. I think that A.J. Brown is a Hall of Fame caliber wide receiver. Mike Quick, good receiver. Was he great? I don't know, and I don't really think so. I think A.J. Brown is a great receiver, and he's the greatest to ever put on the Eagles midnight green.
Did you say Mike Quick wasn't great?
I think Mike Quick was a good receiver. I don't know he's as great as A.J. Brown. I think Mike Quick is a great receiver. Mike Quick's record was broken by A.J. Brown last season for the most touchdowns receiving by a wide receiver, so there's just something to think about. I do think that A.J. Brown is better than Mike Quick. I think Mike Quick is a very, very talented receiver. A.J. Brown's just better.
I like the talent aspect for A.J. Brown. Obviously, he's the big guy. You can kind of compare him to guys like Calvin Johnson. He's just a big guy, and A.J. Brown is probably the modern day version of him, but I'm just going to need to see just a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think he's already there, Brian, and I think that when you look at the list of Eagles wide receivers, some guys have already reached the Hall of Fame, some haven't. I think that most would argue it would probably be Terrell Owens. Terrell Owens, in his time in Philadelphia, he's not remembered as an Eagle because he bounced around the league. I think A.J. Brown is also going to be here a long time. His time with the Titans is really going to be a distant memory when it's all said and done, and I think that he's already the best to put on the Eagles uniform with the wide receiver position.
Well, all right, what about a name that was not mentioned, Tommy McDonald here? As you see, he only played 7 seasons but had 66 touchdowns here, so what about him?
I think that Tommy McDonald, when he played, he was great for the time, but the game has evolved so much more to today's point that I think that A.J. Brown is just playing. It's harder to play football today than it was back then because of how much better we've gotten with sports science, sports medicine, just athletics in general. I think that A.J. Brown is a lot better than Tommy McDonald, and I think he's better than any other wide receiver in Philadelphia Eagles history.
Thank you for the take, Jake. Now moving on, we'll be talking about the Philadelphia 76ers, and the first thing I think we need to discuss here is, does this James Harden trade benefit the Sixers in any way?
I would say no, because of the return that we got. Not really a huge fan of it. I mean, obviously, there were some pieces that are important. Robert Covington coming back, he was with the process for a couple years. Getting those 2 first-round picks later down the line is definitely going to be important. I'm curious to see what 7th grader steps up and becomes that guy, hopefully, for the Sixers. But, yeah, I'm feeling kind of mixed on the stuff we got back from the LA Clippers.
I'm going to have to disagree. I'm going to go yes, 1,000 times yes, that this trade was good for the 76ers. James Harden was such a locker room cancer, a guy that did not want to be here. He's made that very known. His relationship with the front office was broken beyond repair, as he said. I think it doesn't even matter what you got back, let alone you got back a good guy, a young guy in KJ Martin, a couple picks that you can use to package for maybe somebody down the line at the deadline. I like Nicholas Batum and Marcus Morris on expiring contracts, and then the hometown hero, Robert Covington, coming back, a process legend that is now going to be on the team while it's competing, I think is really good for the Sixers. So I like the move, and I really like it because James Harden is goodbye and good riddance. Stay over there in LA.
I do agree with that, Jake. I'm glad that Harden's gone. I'm glad we don't have to deal with that drama anymore because I think that was holding the team back, especially last year from getting farther down the line in the playoffs. But I like Covington coming back. I like some of the young guys and some of the older guys on the expiring contracts, but I don't know if that's going to really propel them right now.
Yeah, and you make a good point. I do think that already, though, this team is built to succeed, and we saw it with the way that they were playing without James Harden. Now you get rid of all the drama around James Harden, and you already have the pieces to contend. They've played a good couple of games against quality opponents, and I think that just James Harden being gone gives this team one big thing less that they have to worry about.
Yeah, I'm talking about what they've done without Harden, and now with him gone, the big question is Tyrese Maxey really that guy? Is he going to be the guard that's going to step up for the Sixers here?
I'm going to have to cautiously say yes. I think that Tyrese Maxey can do it, but in such a small sample size, you don't know. And he already made such a big jump between 2 years ago and last year. Is it realistic to say that he makes that big of a jump from last year to this year? Can he be the number 2 option for this Philadelphia 76ers team? I definitely hope that he can, but I'm just not totally convinced right now.
I'm going to give a big yes to that question. I mean, I think from what I've seen so far from Maxey this season, he's really stepping up to be that number 2 option behind Embiid. And obviously last year he was that guy who would he was like a hidden third option behind Harden and Embiid. But now, as he's given the chance to kind of step up and propel himself as a big playmaker for the Sixers, I like that he can truly blossom into a number 2 option. Then he has guys behind them that he can rely on. Kelly Oubre, he's looking pretty dang good so far for the Sixers. So I kind of like the trio there of Embiid, Maxey, and Kelly Oubre.
I just think that with the jump that Tyrese Maxey already made 2 seasons ago, averaged 17.5 points. Last year, averaged almost 20. Big jump there in the points per game. His assist numbers went down because he was looked at more to score with Harden being the facilitator. But I do think that he made such a big jump. Is it realistic or reasonable that he's going to do it again? I just don't really see it happening. I see Tyrese Maxey being a good third option like we saw last year, but I'm just not sure that he's good enough to go in a 2-man game with Embiid like Harden once did.
But I think now we're seeing the team without Harden don't have to deal with that drama anymore, and they've played super well without Harden in the fold. I mean, we've seen the performances from Maxey so far this season. Couple times he's gone over 25 points, up to 34 most recently. So I think that with the Player of the Week that he just recently received, he's a very flashy and young player who can hit threes. I just think that he is that guy right now, and hopefully that he can continue to propel himself.
Yeah, hopefully he will be. And now just the question that I feel like we find ourselves asking every year with this team is, do the Sixers have what it takes to win the East?
I'm going to have to say no. I think there are a lot of powerful teams in this Eastern Conference. I mean, you have the Bucks with Giannis and now Damian Lillard. You have the Celtics with Jason Tatum. I mean, a lot of high-powered teams that have proven themselves to get to the finals and win it. I mean, we saw Giannis win it not too long ago, so definitely a lot of high-powered teams. And, I mean, the Sixers do have a chance to compete for playoffs, obviously. I mean, I think we can all agree on that right now. They have the talent to get there, but I just don't think it's realistic right now for me to say that they'll compete for that number 1 spot.
I agree with you there, Brian, but for a different reason. I do think that the Sixers are built to contend right now. It comes down to who they have in the locker room. Their leader, their MVP is Joel Embiid, who's a guy that disappears when it comes playoff time. I'm just going to come out right and say it. Joel Embiid does not have what it takes to be a winner in the NBA. He cares way too much more about going out and winning an MVP, winning a Player of the Month, winning personal accolades. He doesn't really care too much about the team, and I really hope that that changes, but that's got to come within one guy. It's got to come within Joel Embiid, and right now he hasn't seemed to make a change because every year he just manages to fade in the playoffs.
I'm going to agree with that, Jake. I mean, the emotion that we've seen from Joel Embiid, him showing that on the court, it just doesn't give me the confidence to say that he is going to be the winner and the leader for this Sixers team. So I hope that other guys like Maxey and Oubre and heck, maybe even Pat Bev can step up and really show that leadership role, maybe as a veteran role as well. So you just never know.
For sure, yeah. Hopefully people will step up and the Sixers can contend with the East. But now it's time to move on to the sensitive topic, the Philadelphia Phillies. And the big question I think everyone's asking right now is who blew it in the NLCS?
Well, to me, it's got to go to the lineup. You're paying those guys so much money for them to just not produce when it matters most. You're looking at a guy like Kyle Schwarber, who really was hot for a couple games, then got cold. Trey Turner and Nick Castellanos are just swinging at anything. It doesn't matter whether it's in the strike zone or not. Harper seemed to have a bit of a down postseason than he did compared to last year, and Alec Boehm in the 4-hole was just abysmal last postseason. He was just not good at all. Managed to come up short every single time when it mattered for the Phillies in that 4 spot, and I just really think that it has to come down to this lineup.
And when you were talking about Harper, I wouldn't say he had necessarily a down postseason because he definitely proved his worth in that Braves series in the NLDS. He just started to kind of fade away once it got to the series against the Diamondbacks. But my official blame would probably have to go to Rob Thompson. I didn't like the trust that he showed a lot in Craig Kimbrell, especially in those high leverage situations. And I was glad that they did close as the NLCS was getting closer to the end. I liked how they moved him into lower leverage, but for trusting him on the road back-to-back games to get the win, the way he pitches just kind of frustrates me. And part of it is going to be blamed on Rob Thompson for me. I don't like the trust that he shows in Kimbrell. And I also wasn't a huge fan at keeping the lineup the way it was throughout the entire series. Yeah, you want to stay consistent, but I think you should have made a change earlier in the NLCS, moving Boehm maybe down in the lineup to take away some of that pressure being behind Harper.
I just think that if it was already working, why fix it? It had brought you this far. You might as well just stick to your guns. And I think the same thing could be said for Kimbrell. Kimbrell was an all-star this year. I think a lot of people forget about that. He was the all-star closer. He was your guy that was supposed to go out and perform in high-leverage situations, and he let you down. It's not on pitching. It's still on the lineup. Craig Kimbrell shouldn't be in that much of a high-leverage save where he has to go out and it's a one-run game in the bottom of the ninth, and eventually he goes out and blows it. The offense should just be putting up as many runs as possible, and they just underperformed time and time again, and that's the reason why the Phillies were sitting on the couch and watched the Diamondbacks play in the World Series.
Yeah, so next year, 2 very big names for the Phillies in recent years, Aaron Nola and Rhys Hoskins. Who do you think the front office brings back?
I'm going to have to say Aaron Nola. I mean, he's been a day one for the Phillies. He's been here through thick and thin, and he has been, for the most part, he's been very dominant. I like what I see from Nola for the most part. I think, yeah, he did have his hiccups this regular season, a 4.46 ERA, but he pitched innings, he got strikeouts, and he was just he was a guy that I could have my trust in. I mean, obviously, the confidence during the regular season, especially this past year, wasn't really there, but I think he's been through thick and thin since day one, and for me, he's the definition of a Philadelphia athlete.
Both guys are 30 years old. They're both starting to age, and I think the one that just makes most sense for the team fit would be Aaron Nola. I mean, to me, you need that second starting pitcher because if you look at the rotation without him, is Ranger Suarez good enough to be your second starter? Are you really relying that much on Taijuan Walker and Christopher Sanchez in the postseason in a 7-game series? I just can't see it happening. So for that reason, I'm going to have to pick Aaron Nola, who had a shaky regular season, kind of came out and proved it in the postseason as to why he should be getting paid the money that he wants to get paid. I think that hopefully he'll stay here, maybe take a hometown deal to stay with the team and try and finish his career in Philadelphia. And when you look at the lineup, if the lineup stays the same and the Phillies don't really make any changes, there is no place for Rhys Hoskins. Harper is now at first base. If you plan on keeping Castellanos, he's in right field. If you move Harper back to right field, you can make a case for Rhys Hoskins, but he just has such a streaky bat, just like the rest of them. He'd be not much better, and he could go cold like the rest of the lineup did, as we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I could see that because, we saw Rhys Hoskins. He's a guy who can hit 30 home runs. I mean, we saw him do it in 2022. We saw him come up in the postseason during their terrific run to the World Series not too long ago. But I just don't think, you're right, Jake, I don't think that he's got a place in this lineup, especially if Harper wants to stay at first base. And if he wants to go back to right field, then it kind of just creates a whole situation out there in the outfield. Because where does Nick Castellanos go? Where is Marsh going to go? What are they going to do with Schwarber? So I think it's just, there's a whole, situation that I just don't think the Phillies are going to want to go through. So I think Aaron Nola is the right guy to bring back.
The fact that you even mentioned Kyle Schwarber touching the outfield really hurts my heart a little bit. Kyle Schwarber and outfield should never be mentioned in the same sentence ever again. But to your point, Brian, it does make a bit of a mess if if Bryce Harper tries to go back to right field. It's going to cause such a problem. Do they move Castellanos? Do you send Johan Rojas back down to AAA? There's so many things that could happen if Harper decides to move. I think that hopefully they solidify him at first base, and there's just not enough for them to bring back Rhys Hoskins. I think the lineup is pretty set. You just got to hope that they're hot next time around November.
Yeah, thank you guys. Now the Flyers. Does Mitch Kov make the Flyers a playoff team this season?
I would say no. I mean, I like what I see from him. I mean, he was signed to that contract, and we'll see him later down the line. But I just don't think right now Mitch Cobb is going to be that guy that's going to really improve the Flyers to a playoff contending team. I think they're still trying to just kind of figure things out with some of their guys that they have right now. So yeah, I'm just going to have to say no to that.
Well, Mitch Cobb doesn't come over to the United States until 2 to 3 years down the line because he still has to finish his contract overseas in Russia. I think that Mitch Kov is such a talented player, and when we heard before, the whole situation between Russia and why he wasn't allowed to come over, it was being called the Bedard and Mitch Kov draft by a couple people out there. I think that he is such a steal at 7 that he could elevate this team that had been playing pretty solid hockey until the injury of Carter Hart to the playoffs when he's able to come over here.
Yeah, and I just want to bring something up. Of course, the one Flyers game I decided to go to was the one that Carter Hart gets hurt at. And I thought I had good luck with sports. I mean, when I was at the Phillies games during the regular season, I got to see 9 out of 10 wins. So I guess the bad luck just kind of moved over to the Flyers.
Unfortunately, hopefully Carter Hart rests up quick and they get him back out on the ice soon. But that's going to wrap it up for this episode of The Philly Jawn. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I'm Travis Schmidt, joined by Brian McLernon and Jake Clark. That's it.